We're going to have some participants listening in, guys, so just be aware of that.
That's good.
Yeah, I'm glad.
All right, I got 5. We're ready to go.
Okay. And we know when. Guys, so just be aware of that. Tell me when, Ross.
You go. It's time. Go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the September 1st, 2021 special called meeting of the Lamar County School Board. Before we get started, I've asked Mr. Jim Braswell if he just open us up in a word of prayer.
Pray. Lord, I want to thank you for being creator of all. Psalms 103:3, you tell us you heal all our diseases. Let me ask you now, Lord, to give us wisdom as elected school board members, our superintendent, Dr. Hampton, our district staff, especially our teachers and support staff. Lord, bless this short meeting. In Jesus' name, just as you asked, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jim. All right, item number 2 on the general agenda is a roll call. I'm just going to call everyone's name if everyone will say a simple here or present. Mr. Braswell?
Here.
Mr. Chance?
Present.
Ms. Hinterling?
Here.
Mr. Mayo?
Here.
Mr. Norton?
Present.
Dr.
You can call me. I'm here.
Okay. All righty.
Dr.
Item number 3, the approval of general agenda. Do I have a motion?
Matt moves.
Do I have a second?
Jim, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes. Item number 4, discussion of students returning to face-to-face learning. And we'll turn it to Dr. Hampton.
Okay.
And we'll move
Can
on
you-
to
can
item
everyone-
number 5.
Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
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 Okay.
Clearly.
All right. So I know we have a number of parents who are listening and or will listen to this meeting at some point. So I want to make something make sure I make something very clear. Is that as a school district, we have a responsibility to provide a safe learning environment to all of our students, not just 1 or 2, not just yours or mine, but all of our students. But also, as an employer, we have a responsibility to provide a safe working environment to all of our employees. That means teachers, teacher assistant, bus drivers, cafeteria staff, clerical staff, directors, coaches, on and on, administrators, on and on and on. And so sometimes parents lose sight of that fact that there's more stake than just their child. And I want to assure this board and everyone listening that every decision that has been made has put the safety of all of our students and our employees first. So I'd like to reiterate and I'd like to kind of talk about some of the differences between our elementary, middle school, and high schools and how they operate, because I think that's something that I think parents and our teachers and our community members need to understand, that there's a big difference in how a elementary operates, how a middle school and high school operates. And that plays a lot into some of our decisions when we're looking at the positivity rate or the quarantine issues that we're facing in our schools. You know, in an elementary, a teacher in an elementary with an elementary certification can teach any subject in elementary. And so middle school and high school teachers have to be certified in a specific area to teach that. And so when you're talking about middle school and high school teachers, If they teach science, they have to be specifically certified to teach science or math or history or English or any of the subjects that we have. Elementary students, and here's some of the differences. Elementary students are typically are in cohorts. This means that elementary students stay within the same group of students all day long. They stay in there. They get math lessons together. They get English lessons. They go to activity together. They don't change classes like our middle and high school do. This helps limit elementary students and also our elementary teachers' exposure to potentially positive cases throughout the school day. In full face-to-face instruction, elementary teachers typically see somewhere between 25 and 50 kids a day. That might be that one elementary teacher teaches as math, and so she teaches one class math, and they swap, two teachers swap, and so typically they'll see about 50 kids a day. With middle school and high school students, they change classes throughout the day in order to attend different classes they need to earn credits towards graduation and prepare them for the next step of college or career. Changing classes like this means that middle school and high school teachers have different students each period or block. Middle school teachers typically teach somewhere between 5 and 7 classes a day, which means that they could see upward to 150 kids, 150 different kids a day. High school teachers teach 3, sometimes 4 blocks a day, which would put them somewhere upward to about 100 different students on average a day. With teachers out with COVID and various other reasons, coupled with having fewer substitutes, we have teachers who are out with their family members who have been tested positive, or they've had surgery, or they've had issues where they have to be out. And you couple that with fewer substitute teachers. We've had a large issue trying to find substitute teachers to cover classes. And so we've had to ask our teachers to cover different classes on their planning period or planning time. And so that puts them in front of more students. And this only increases the number of students that they are exposed to over a course of a day. Elementary students, also another difference is elementary students participate in fewer extracurricular activities, both during the school day and outside the school day. During school day activities, elementary students stay within the same class or the cohort. They're in that same class. Again, they stay with the same cohort of students. Middle and high school students get to choose their activities, and they try out for different sports and activities. And so this means that middle and high school students commingle with a number of different students during their extracurricular activities. And these extracurricular activities also extend after school, normal school hours. Elementary students do not have the same opportunities to socialize outside of school and gather with one another as middle and high school, and especially high school. When they have jobs, and they are more active socially outside, and that increases their chances of being exposed to positive. So I'd like to talk a little bit about data and some of the things that we have looked at as opposed to in contrast and compare and contrast some of the before we went to hybrid, and when we were full face-to-face, and after we were in hybrid. So when you look at a historical standpoint for our students, when we started school, within the first week, we started on a Thursday and a Friday, where half our kids came Thursday and half came Friday. But we had positive cases before that were reported. We had to quarantine due to exposure to positive outside of school before that as well. And so we had, in that first 2 days, that first week of school, we had 166 total reports. And 68 were positive. We only had 11 close contacts in school and 85 outside of school, excuse me. The second week, we saw it jump up to 670 reports. The third week, we saw it jump up to 1,473 reports. And we had to quarantine that third week. We had to quarantine 803 students due to being in close contact at school, because we weren't able to socially distance, and we weren't able to keep them socially distant in the classrooms, versus 420 outside of school. And so during that third week is when we also had a number of our outbreaks where we actually had to shut down 6 schools during that first week due to the number of positive and outbreaks are having 3 positive students within a defined area, a classroom or activity. And so we had a number of outbreaks in our schools, and we had to shut down. We had to shut down at least 6 of our schools that third week of school. Then the next week we saw smaller cases because we had 6 of our schools shut down. Well, I would say shut down, but they were virtual learning. And so we had the fourth week, we had 707 reports of positive or close contacts, where we had 328 students who were close contact inside of schools. But even then, we had to shut down 3 more schools for a total of, by the fourth week of school, we had a total of 9 schools shut down or going straight to virtual. That's when we made the decision to go to a hybrid the next week, starting on August the 16th. And so then we started seeing our numbers drop of reports with 574 total reports, and we only had 109 close contacts at school that week. And then the next week we saw 416 reports with only 88 close contacts at school those weeks. And so we are now for this week we're at 82 reports with only 10 close contacts in the school. So I would like to point out that I broke it down by elementary and middle and high. In the elementary schools, when we're talking about close contact at school, where when a student is a close contact within the classroom and we have to quarantine them for 14 days, total elementary students, we've had 995 close contact at school. Before we went hybrid in the elementary, we had 845 close contact, and after we went hybrid, we only had 150 kids that we've had to close contact due to in school, close contact in school. For middle schools, it's even more drastic. Is we've had 415 in our middle schools. We have 415 kids that we've had to quarantine due to close contact at school. 403 of those students were before we went hybrid, and we've only had 12 students that we've had to send home quarantine due to close contact at school. The high schools, we've had 308 at school close contact. 286 of those were before hybrid, and 22 have been after we've done hybrid. So, the hybrid, when you look at the data, it has allowed us to keep from having to send kids home from close contact within the classroom more effectively, and has allowed us to continue to have some face-to-face instruction without having so many outbreaks within the school. We've had a situation in one area of one of our high schools this week where we've had a number of positives in this high school, and because some of them were on A day and some of them were on B day, that we did not see a situation where we had to shut down due to the number of outbreaks, because they weren't ever exposed to one another at that high school. So any questions about that? Any of that data? Is there any other data that the board would like to have questions about? Or okay, you'll stay with me?
No, Dr.
Okay.
Hampton, I would just like to thank you for being so data driven, because the numbers really do matter, and that means something. I think that it goes without saying that the plan that you put before the board to go hybrid has absolutely worked, and I think that needs to be said. I think that people need to notice that it was a game changer for us at a time when we were, quickly about to shut down the vast majority, not shut down, but go 100% virtual with a vast majority of our campuses in the district. So I just wanted to say that. But thank you for those numbers, because they really are telling.
I do appreciate that, and that's the one thing I want to assure you as a board, but also the parents and the community, is that we don't just arbitrarily look at, or we don't want to just shut down or go virtual with kids or schools. It's a situation where we're constantly looking at the data, making sure that we're making data-driven decisions, making it based on data, not. And you can ask any one of the administrators. I don't like I think and I feel. I think this or I feel that. I want to see the data, and we want to make sure we make informed decisions for what's safest for our students and what's also best. Because I do think going to hybrid has allowed us to have more face-to-face in the long run instruction with our students, because we're not having to shut down so many schools. We would have had, if we weren't hybrid at this one high school in our district, if we weren't hybrid this week, we would have had to shut down. If we were to combine those together and was full face-to-face, we would have had at least 6 outbreaks at this high school. And we would have had to shut down and go virtual for 2 weeks at the high school. And but being hybrid allowed us them to not have the outbreaks because some were A day, some were B day, and they did not expose each other. We were able to also social distance in those classrooms, so that we're not having a close contact within the classroom, because we are wearing masks and we are staying at least 3 feet apart in the classrooms. So.
And so, Dr. Hampton, you're saying that in our pre-K through 5th grade, when we look at it, their exposure is generally 20 to 25 or so students all day long, same pod or same group.
Correct.
And then they go home.
Correct. And so,
okay, I understand that, as opposed to the other schools, the way we have classes set up.
Yes, sir. Due to the certification requirements that we have for our middle and high school, because they start earning Carnegie units in the middle school towards graduation, you had to have certain certifications. You know, for me, when I was in the classroom, I was a math teacher, and I had a certification of math, middle school, high school math, 7 through 12. Math, and so I could only teach math, and so I couldn't teach English, I couldn't teach science, I couldn't teach history, I couldn't teach physics or any of those other courses. I could only teach math. And so when I was in the classroom, and so that's why our children have to change classes and go to different classes to take those courses. And when you get into a high school, especially a high school setting, and somewhat in our middle school, is that students take different levels of math. Some of our advanced students will take more advanced math. Some of our struggling students may take a lower math at first and work their way up. And so, because their requirements are different towards graduation, each child's graduation requirements are different. They have the same overall graduation requirements, but how they take those courses are different. Let me put it that way. I want to be clear on that. Is that they all have the same basic graduation requirements, but some of our students may be on a more advanced course, and some of them may not be. And so that's why they take different courses also within the same subject. And so I might be taking Algebra 1 while someone else would have to take advanced math or trigonometry or calculus, you know, in my grade level. So. So that's where you get the differences in how we had to swap classes in the high school.
But the exposure situation in our elementary schools are completely different.
Correct. That's absolutely. For the most part, they are. We by the way, this class is set up with cohorts that we limit we can do a better job of limiting their exposure to other students and to our faculty and staff as well.
Okay.
You're absolutely correct. So, you know, and I like to say is that, you know, from the beginning of this pandemic, we have said that we want students learn best. We know that students learn best face-to-face when they're face-to-face with their teachers. That's our goal. That's our ultimate goal, is to get our kids face-to-face with their teachers. We truly believe that. I mean, there's no denying. I don't think that there's anybody or any teacher in this district that will deny that. But we're only trained educators. We're not trained public health we're not trained in public health matters. We're not public health experts. And so, we didn't want to shut down 9 schools and go virtually with those 9 schools. And the decision to go hybrid was out of one as a stopgap measure so that we could actually have some face-to-face instruction with our kids. And I want to make sure that our parents and our community members know that, because I think I've gotten some comments from community members and parents that our teachers want to go virtual or go hybrid, and that's just simply not true. Our teachers, teaching virtually is difficult for our teachers. I mean, they're not as effective. They don't feel like they can reach their kids. They don't feel like they can adequately teach their students when they're sitting behind a computer screen. The hybrid schedule for our teachers, plain and simple, it's just twice the work for our teachers. It doubles their workload, and so, but it allows us to have some face to face. So I feel safe in saying that, if you ask any of our teachers, they would want their kids in their class. You ask any of our administrators, they want their kids at school. So we've got to find ways to try to balance and get our kids back as much as possible and do what's safe, but also what's best for their education as well.
Dr. Hampton, to change gears a little bit, but on the
Sure.
same line, the outbreak and the definition of the outbreaks by the state standards is pretty limiting because it doesn't consider at all the population of a school and how few
Correct.
kids can be involved to shut down or to convert to full virtual underneath the Mississippi Department of Health guidelines. Is there I think that standard is too stringent, and I think we need to look at an alternative that takes into account size of school so that when we go back to face, that there's a goal that has to be hit to accomplish going back face to face, but there's also an intermediate goal that if we get to a certain, and the example I'm proposing is a percentage of the population that becomes isolated or quarantined, that we convert back to hybrid and that we take the 14-day off the table and manage the numbers through a process like that so that we can eliminate that 14-day issue and do it instead based on really the populations of our schools. Because we can look week over week the way the data is compiled and see what schools are trending in what directions, what percent of the population is isolated or quarantined, and things like that. And I'd like us to set some type of standard like that to both come out of to come out of hybrid, but as well as what it would trigger to go back into hybrid in lieu of a full virtual.
I'm not opposed at all to that. I'd love to be able, and I have actually tried to sit down again, being data driven and looking at data and from every angle, try to find some rhyme or reason to where we could have a threshold, or I hate to say a break even point, but have some kind of threshold to where we would say, this is where we get to do X, Y, and Z, or X at this point we do X, at this point we do Y, to do Z at this point. The hardest thing is because of the differences I mentioned, but in the elementary, middle school, and high schools, how they run. When we look at when we look at the number of positive in some of our elementary schools, with a percentage that are being quarantined and positive in some of our elementary schools, because they don't have the exposure our middle and high school has. We typically run a higher percentage of students who have tested positive at an elementary school without having the outbreak situation. And if we have an outbreak, it's contained to one class.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think we should definitely treat the elementary school, because of their traffic flow, differently than the middle school and the high school. And I also think we should treat schools individually based on their numbers and not make district-wide decisions.
Yeah, and that was the other thing I was going to bring up as well, is that, when you have a disparity that we have in the number of students at the different, if you just take high schools, the number of students at each one of our high schools are widely, the range varies widely at our high schools, our middle schools, and our elementaries, and so the number of students also can drive that conversation as well. The type of school and the number of school, and I would love to be able to, sit down. I don't know what to suggest, and
Can I make
Deborah, I
a
don't know if
suggestion?
absolutely.
Yeah. Can I make a suggestion? Rick Norton has always told me that I can call to get a meeting to look into certain things. Matt, do you mind being the head of that committee? And with myself and Stephen, sit down and try and come up with some triggers at the school level.
Sure, I'll be happy.
And also, okay, all right. So if everyone else is okay with that, we'll vote for that, and we'll form a committee, and maybe we can report back forward on the 13th at our regular scheduled meeting.
Yeah, I think that we need to find some time within.
That's fine with Jim.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yes, this is Jenny. I agree.
Jeremy, you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Hampton? All right, we're going to move on to item number 5, and I'm gonna call it up, and I'm gonna let Dr. Hampton make his recommendation. It is a recommendation to return students face-to-face.
Okay. Based on the information I provided you guys up to this point, and knowing the differences between elementary, middle, and high school, I do feel like at this point where we are, that it is safe that we can return all pre-K through 5th grade students in our school district to full face-to-face instruction. And we need to start that. I'd like to say that start that Tuesday, September the 7th, after Labor Day weekend. That will give our teachers time to prepare adequately, our bus routes to time to prepare adequately, our cafeteria to be able to prepare adequately. I still want to, part of the recommendation is for middle at this point now. And again, our goal is to get back to face-to-face as soon as possible. But at this point, because of the differences, I still want to recommend that middle and high school and high school students continue the hybrid schedule. I still would like to make the recommendation that face coverings be required for everyone while inside of any Lamar County School District building, as well as on the bus at this time. Do I need to repeat that more succinctly?
I think we got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I'll
open the motion.
I move to accept the recommendation of superintendent to return K through 5 students to full-time traditional learning effective September 7th, and require that face masks be worn at all times across all grades inside school buildings.
Okay, and that's pre-K through 5, Matt, just make sure.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I have a motion. Do I have a second? Thank you, Jim.
This is Jim with a second.
Thank you.
And that's middle and high school students will continue the hybrid schedule.
That's correct.
Correct.
Yes.
All right, I have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? And that passes. Item number 6 is to recess. I have a motion.
So
Jim, I so move.
I have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
That passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.